The Boston Celtics have had the easiest route to the NBA Finals ever. But does it really matter? That's what I'm going to talk about here. Like, I made a video about this basically saying, are Boston frauds because of how poor they looked through the playoffs? And it was after they lost game 2, I think it was. Or it was after they beat Cleveland and they nearly lost to like Cleveland's bench basically. And I'm going to talk a little bit about it because they're obviously going to beat the Pacers. Like, they're 3-0 up and the Pacers are missing Tyrese Halliburton. And speaking of Tyrese Halliburton, did you guys see Ball Don't Stop saying he needs to put a hezzy tween mid? He needs to literally, I think this is a quote. He needs to get a hezzy tween pull up in his game. I love to laugh at that guy. Either way, when we're talking about the Boston Celtics, it is a really interesting one because when it comes to them, have they been poor in the playoffs? A lot of the time, yeah. So I think it's you can't really argue that Boston have been this exceptional team in this playoffs, regardless of how many games they've won. They've been quite poor, but they're still winning. Like, they are digging themselves holes and coming back. They are digging themselves holes that you think are just over. You think it's just done, like game 1 against the Pacers, and they're winning. Like, other than the game 2 in the first 2 series where they just switched off entirely, they've either blown teams out or in a close game pulled through. I do apologize for hitting my laptop screen there. I do apologize if you're watching this video. Sorry, I am in a hotel right now with terrible lighting. Hopefully it's better. I'm moving to a different hotel. Hopefully that one's better in the next couple of days. But I'm more like optimistic. I'd be more optimistic if I was like, not optimistic. I'm more worried because I don't want the Celtics to win. I'm just putting that out there. I don't want the Celtics to win. Like, their fans are as insufferable as Knicks fans, but at least Knicks fans are like good fans. They're like passionate, good fans. They can be insufferable at times, whereas Boston are insufferable and they're not nearly as good fans as the New York Knicks. So when it comes to that, I just don't want them to win. And like, I'm an Irishman. Everyone just assumed I'm a Celtics fan, man. I don't hate the Celtics. I don't hate Jason Tatum. I don't hate Jaylen Brown. I don't hate any player on that team. I'd love to see Porzingis get a ring, but I just don't want to see Boston fans being able to celebrate going for ring number 18. But anyway, I initially completely wrote them off. And a lot of people are like, oh, Dallas is going to beat them if they go play them. Minnesota's going to beat them if they play them. And I would still favor the West. But Boston just... they have the ability for 2 or 3 of their starting 5 to have bad games and win. They're the only team that has that. They're the only team who Jason Tatum and Jaylen Brown can have a bad game. They're 2 best players and they could win. If Ant and Kat have a bad game, they're going to lose. If Luka Doncic and Kyrie have a bad game, Mavs are going to lose. Pacers are out. Let's not talk about the Pacers. But that is the big difference, is that they're in a scenario where any given day, they've got 5 players that can play like an all-star in any given day. And that's scary. I don't see Porzingis coming back, by the way. I genuinely don't. Like, I said at the time, done for the playoffs, like, that looked like either a torn calf or a torn Achilles. It's not a torn Achilles, obviously, because we know if it's a torn Achilles. So he's probably tore his calf. Like, you don't pull up like that off that type of move unless you've torn it. That is not a calf strain. Like, and again, this is someone who has not a doctor, but has had both calf strains, torn calf, and torn my Achilles. I have a rough idea, especially because if it was a calf strain, he'd already be back if this was a calf strain. So I doubt Porzingis. If he comes back, great. If he doesn't, I still think they have a chance without him. It's just a little bit less bench depth. But then, like, Luke Cornett comes in and plays well, and Peyton Pritchard comes in and plays well, and their guys are clutch. I hate to say it, they're clutch. And Jason Tatum is the most confusing player ever, especially playoff Jason Tatum, because playoff Jason Tatum will look like a scrub one game, and then the next game look like the second coming of Michael Jordan. His inconsistency in the playoffs has been wild. Like, even when, like, last year, He goes and has 50-something points. He breaks the record of points in Game 7. Has a couple of bad games against Miami, then absolutely balls out in a few games. And then he was brilliant in 2022, and then just stunk it up in the finals. So he's such a confusing player, but he's still unbelievable. Jaylen Brown is not worth the money, but he's showing that he's worth quite a lot of money. Not the highest paid player in the league, but he's showing that he's worth a near max. Jrue Holiday is finally stopping looking like Drew Bledsoe. He looked like Drew Bledsoe through 2 series. Derek White's cooled off a bit, but he's still going to give you some good minutes. Al Horford's still going to give you minutes. And their bench is doing well. And I'm really impressed with how they got on in games 1 and 3. No matter, regardless of game 3 yesterday, they sleptwalked through that game. They sleptwalked into an 18-point deficit, and Indiana got hot as anything, but they still came back and won. That's the sign of a good team where it's okay, yeah, we can dig a deficit. We believe in ourselves. We're going to win anyway. It looked like it was over in game 1, and they still came back to win. So they do have that little bit of champion DNA, and they have more playoff experience than anyone left in the competition. Albeit people are oh, it's only experience losing. Well, yeah, they all have experienced losing. Every one of them has experienced losing. And they're in the finals. So they're already there. And does the easy playoff run matter? Not really, because who cares? They're there. They still have to play Dallas or Minnesota. And unless Ant-Man or Luka break their leg and are out for the series, it's going to be a hell of a series. And if they win that, then all of the way they got through the East is forgotten about. We can't forget, some of the years LeBron James' Cavs teams, where they'd face, Detroit round 1. They'd go and face Atlanta in the conference finals, and I can't remember. What was it? The freaking 2014 Miami LeBron, where they faced Charlotte Bobcats. Yes, the Bobcats in round 1. Round 2, they faced the Kevin Garnett, Paul Pierce, Brooklyn Nets, who sucked. And in the conference finals, they faced the Pacers. And this was not the Pacers were the 1 seed, but this is not when the Pacers were good. This was the Pacers after being brought to 7 by the 8 seed Hawks when Roy Hibbert forgot how to play basketball. This was a Pacers team in a horrible way. But then they got to the final and lost anyway. But once you're there, it doesn't matter how you got there. It doesn't matter. All this discourse about how they got there doesn't matter if they win. If they lose to whoever comes out the West, then obviously people are going to discredit the finals run because it wasn't that impressive, especially 2022 where it's Milwaukee in 7, Miami in 7. That was a legit finals run. But if they win, it doesn't matter. It doesn't matter how they got there as long as they win. But if they lose, obviously no one's going to give it a flying FUCK about them making these finals. So that really is it. I actually think, I don't know if it's advantage or disadvantage. They've still had close games, but they have sleptwalked in. I think it's a disadvantage, especially if Dallas go and win 4 or 5. Because it means both teams have a long rest. Both teams are going to be fresh, but Dallas are battle tested. Whereas the Celtics, the best team they faced was 2 games of the Cleveland Cavaliers without Jared Allen.